Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, morning, everyone. Welcome to the Swansea Morning. Welcome to the Swansea Pension Fund Committee, which is being held under Local Authority Coronavirus Meetings Wales Regulations 2020. Can I particularly welcome David Morton from Hymans Robertson. This is David's first meeting, and he will be taking over as partner representative from William Marshall. David is a partner and senior investment consultant with over 20 years experience in the pensions industries, and I'm sure we all look forward to working with David and getting his advice and contributions over the coming weeks, months, and even longer if possible. So welcome, David.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So this open part of the meeting is being broadcast live so that members of the public and others may view it. Can you please ensure you all mute your microphones and remember to unmute them when you are called to speak. The Democratic Services Officer will call out the names of all taking part in the meeting, so please confirm your attendance when called. Jeremy?
Councillor Clive Lloyd.
Present.
Councillor John Curtis.
Present.
Councillor Phil Downing.
Present.
Councillor Gareth Sullivan.
Present.
Councillor Will Thomas.
Present.
Councillor Peter Rees.
Present.
And advisors Nick Jalema.
Present.
David Morton.
Present.
Stephen Jasinski. No. Also present Ian Guy.
Present.
And then officers Jeff Dong.
Present.
Karen Cobb.
Present.
Stephanie Williams.
Present.
And I'm Jeremy Parkhouse, Democratic Services.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. So in terms of voting, there are a number of voting items that require a decision today, voting items 4A, 4C and 4D. And the Democratic Services Officer will call your names to confirm your voting preference. We will be going into closed session during the meeting, and the recording and live feed will be stopped following that agreement. And I'll confirm that the recording is stopped with the Democratic Services Officer. There is one agenda item in respect of item 4C, which is the Competition and Markets Authority setting objectives for investment consultant. Would it be possible for Nick and David to briefly leave the meeting at that point while we take that item, and Jeff O'Carron will call you back in when we finished. Is that okay?
Of course.
Well, Phil Downing's just waiting to be let in.
No, I'm having trouble with my.
Ooh. Yeah, all right. Step on mute.
Oh.
Go out and come back in, Phil. That's what they've done before.
Okay.
What happened? I was having trouble with my laptop, so I went on my tablet, and then all of a sudden my laptop popped up, and all these noises happened. So I'm okay now. I'm just on one item. Okay.
Stop taking the tablets, Phil.
That was fun, wasn't it?
Okay, so item 1 then, Jeremy, is there any other apologies for absence?
No apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? I'll go first. I'm a member of the Swansea LGPS.
Me as well, Clive. I'm a member of I'm in receipt of a pension. Thank you.
Member of the fund.
Yeah.
My daughter is
Well,
a member of. My daughter-in-law is a member of the scheme.
Yeah.
Well,
And as usual, my brother is a member of the scheme.
My daughter-in-law is a member of the scheme.
okay.
One more. I'm a member of the old David County Council pension scheme.
Okay, thanks. I forgot to say as well, committee, if you want to speak at all, could you raise your hand if you've got that facility? And if not, if you could put a note in the comments box to indicate you wish to speak. Okay, item 3 then is minutes of the previous meeting, which is on page 1. So we'll take them in order. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6. Somebody, are you happy that they're a correct record?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Clive.
Yep. Okay, so item 4 then is the report of the Section 151 officer, and we go to item 4A, which is annual report 2019-2020, starting on page 7. Okay, Jeff? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, Chairman. I was in the document as we were speaking then. Thank you, Chairman. Committee has before them the annual report, the City and County Swansea Pension Fund 2019-20, as we're required to produce by statute. However, committee members will be very familiar with the financial statements within the report, because obviously committee received the statement of accounts, which is the financial statements of the City and County Swansea Pension Fund at its last meeting, and approved those in their draft form. Because in normal circumstances at this meeting in September, the committee would be receiving the ISA 260 from the Wales Audit Office, outlining their findings of the audit of those financial statements. However, as previously reported, they signalled that due to COVID and their working restrictions and the safety measures they had to put in place, their timetable was adversely affected, and they wouldn't be able to complete their audit of the financial statements as they normally would, and be able to report to you at this juncture. In actual fact, they're doing their material audit work as we speak. I know Karen's had lots of meetings this week with auditors, answering queries, etc., etc. So the annual report you see before you at this moment in time is still in draft form. The financial statements within there are still in draft form, still subject to full audit. However, they have done some audit work, and those eagle-eyed amongst you will notice a difference within the numbers already, because obviously as the audit progresses and differences and misstatements are identified, it's prudent for Karen to run those through the trial balance and restate the financial position as she goes along. I'm not intending to go through the numbers again, because obviously we went through those in March, but just for your information, the difference is in the net asset statement, and as at year end, the net assets have been restated by £8 million, i.e. It's been revalued downwards by £8 million. If I could just give members a bit more detail about why that is the case. Obviously, we're required to follow a national audit and accounting timetable to produce the accounts by a certain date, and in line with that timetable, we're trying to close the accounts earlier and earlier each year, with an aim to being able to close the accounts by the 1st of May by next year. So obviously this year we had to close the accounts by the middle of May. However, in order to do that, in agreement with the auditors, we're required to adopt some estimation techniques in valuing some of the assets. For a large part of our assets, it's no problem about getting actual valuations at 31st of March, things like listed equities, etc., bonds. the pricing sources for those ready available, and we can get them in a timely fashion. However, for lots of the unlisted assets, the private assets requires a lot of legwork, donkey work for professionals to go out and value those assets physically, be they property or private businesses, etc. And one of the valuations that we're required to estimate a value for prior to year end is our private equity portfolio. And obviously we rely on our appointed private equity managers to provide us with their professional estimate of what that valuation may be at year end. This year, they have underestimated the impact of COVID, etc., upon those valuations, and they overstated the value of those assets by £8 million. As time has come past, when the actual valuations have come through post year end, they are £8 million less than we originally estimated. So that has run through the accounts now, and you can see that difference within the annual report here. But just to give you some idea of the volatility of that number and the impact of it, because obviously £8 million is a lot in anyone's estimation, but in terms of a £2 billion pension fund and you know the swings and roundabouts of those estimation techniques. If you recall last year, very same thing happened. We have to rely on them to provide an estimate on that valuation. They undervalued the assets by £5 million last year, so it was the other way around. So it's swings and roundabouts. The auditors are relaxed about it. We've amended it because it's just within their tolerance for materiality limits, and it's washed its way through the accounts. Obviously, those valuations are at a point in time, 31st of March, and they had to value those assets based on the market conditions at that time, and they reflect those market conditions at those time. That's not to say that they're permanently we've permanently lost that £8 million in value at that time. It's just that at that point in time, their estimate was over-egged in relation to the market environment at that time. And as we've seen, markets have bounced back well since that period, and in all probability that £8 million has been reinstated in the valuation of those assets. So that's just for your information, because as I say, the audit is still ongoing, and there may well be other old audit adjustments to come through, and we'll bring those to your attention at a later date if they're material. But as far as the numbers are concerned, I'm not intending to go through the annual report again. The annual report differs slightly, Chairman, from the statement of accounts, in that it includes some additional information that the readers of the accounts may like to read. Such as some information on the administration side of the business, often overlooked when we're purely looking at the numbers. And I suppose just like to draw members' attention to page 17 of your papers, whereby for the first time we conducted a survey, customer service satisfaction survey, and you can see results of that survey there, in terms of the service that we would provide our employers and also our members. Obviously, you know, it doesn't give a completely rosy picture, you know, but however, it's comforting that in the main, both employers and members are satisfied with the service that they receive. However, it's not across the board, and those levels of satisfaction aren't as high as perhaps we would want, and obviously it's a work in progress, but it's a good indication of that we're moving in the right direction. And yeah, it's the first time we've done it, and I'm sure we'll do it again in a periodic fashion. Again, on page 20 of the papers, I think the actuary referred to it in his presentation to committee in March about the data quality. Obviously, it's very, very important in valuation year that the data that we submit is in good order, and it's accurate and reflects the membership and service records of all our members. And the admin team have done a lot of work in cleansing that data and making sure it is accurate. So it's ratifying that the actuary recognised that in his presentation to members in March, and it's sort of borne out by the data scores where we've had our data analysed by our software providers, Hayward's. And then also of interest to members may be on page 26 of the papers, an update on the Wales Pension Partnership more broadly. I know we have an operational update later on in the closed part of the meeting. However, broadly, there's a quick summary here for members of the pension fund about the progress of the work of the WPP. Obviously, we've been, the chairman and myself have been bringing regular briefings to committee on the work that WPP has been doing. However, members are very engaged in the ESG work of the WPP, because obviously the chairman and the Swansea committee have been leading in this respect of the work of the WPP, in that, you know, you formalised and approved your ESG policy a number of years ago. However, WPP have only just recently implemented and approved their responsible investment policy, and is currently working on its climate risk policy, which is to be approved, formally approved. Because obviously the work that this committee did in approving the RI policy translated into the transition of our passive assets from a market cap weighted index to a low carbon index, yeah, and that work has led the way as far as WPP are concerned in terms of other constituent funds considering and adopting that approach. Because following your decision to do that, I know, for example, Cardiff have transitioned their assets into the low carbon fund. Gwynedd are considering it at the moment, and Torfaen are about to transition their passive assets into the low. So you're definitely leading the way in both your thinking and your action in respect of reducing carbon exposure in the portfolio. And currently work is ongoing in addressing that issue in the active part of the portfolio, with the WPP working with Russell Investments about reducing the carbon exposure in the active part of the portfolio. Also in that quick summary is a reference to the WPP appointing Robeco as our voting and engagement partner, because one of our responsibilities as an institutional shareholder, a pension fund stakeholder, etc., is being responsible for the assets that we own, and being active in how those underlying assets are managed, and you know, how their workforces are looked after, and how they make their money. Is it done in a responsible and sustainable way? So during the year, WPP have appointed Robeco to assist at a WPP level in engaging and demonstrating that we are discharging our responsibilities appropriately in that regard. Swansea have never had an engagement partner of that sort before. I suppose it was a sort of a luxury, I suppose, that we thought we couldn't really afford, but collectively between the 8 of us, you know, splitting the costs and sharing the costs, it's something we thought appropriate to adopt and demonstrate that we are looking after our assets responsibly. As I say, Chairman, I'm not proposing to go through the numbers again, because obviously we've been through those once in March. Just happy to take any questions that members may have on the report, Chairman.
Okay, well,
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Jeff, just picking up on something. When you said the survey that we did for members of the fund, I just wonder if there's any scope to potentially ask questions on our ESG policy and how if they're happy with that and what their opinions are on it. I mean, obviously, some people I'm sure would be more than happy, and others would be asking for the highest return possible. I think it's a good way of making people aware that what we're doing, and also at the same time finding out their opinion. And just that question. Really.
It's a good question, Councillor Thomas, and something, you know, we're always trying to strike the balance of having obviously, you know, the pension fund committee have been delegated the responsibility for making decisions in respect of investment strategy, policy, etc. It's you know, it's not policy by consensus almost. You know, you're not asking for a straw poll, but on an issue as broad ranging and as impactful as, for example, climate change perhaps is one of the ESG issues that perhaps you're referring to there. You know, everyone's got an opinion, it's all pervasive, it dominates the political agenda, you know, operational agenda everywhere. So it might be pertinent to maybe try and incorporate some degree of engagement in that respect. In respect of a hard and fast questionnaire, I don't know if that would be appropriate. Maybe some roadshow in terms of education first, because if you ask the question of, say, yourselves, who have had lots of training, education, you're well versed into the arguments both pro and against, you know, you get a reasoned, knowledgeable response. However, if you ask that question of say a lay member, perhaps who doesn't have that appropriate knowledge, background, training that you guys have, you know, you might get a quite naive answer that perhaps, you know, will lead you down some rabbit holes and that perhaps you don't want to go to.
I mean, maybe it's just, are you aware of the work being done with regards to ESG, and do you have any further comments on it? Something like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, we can definitely publicize it more, definitely, because I'm sure the committee get questions from their constituents, etc., haranguing you about, you know, where the assets are invested, etc., etc. So yeah, we can definitely do more on a communications front on that in that regard.
Okay, any others? No. So that survey is annual, Jeff, is it?
Well, it's the first one we've done, Chairman.
Yeah.
So you know, we haven't committed to doing it annually, but yeah, it's the first one we've done, and it's a good starting point. So I suppose best practice would be to do it annually, but I you know, we've got to appraise what we're getting out of it as well, you know, in terms of maybe every 2 years, maybe.
Well, do we know what the return was in terms of?
I can find out. I can find out for you. I haven't got those metrics on me.
All right. Well, let's have a chat further about that. I think Will makes a good point. Well, you both do, about the survey itself and, you know, views, because it's quite an emotional sort of view, isn't it, on the sorts of things that we're talking about here. So maybe if we do one next year or the year after, then we use the time in between to, you know, get the comms out, as you suggested, Dave, Jeff, over a period of time, you know.
Yeah.
So, all right, okay. Any other questions? No. Okay.
You're muted.
You're muted live.
Sorry. So the recommendation is on page 7. That the City and County of Swansea Pension Fund Draft Annual Report 2019-20 and Appendix 1 is approved, subject to further audit. Jeremy, do you want a roll call?
Okay, Councillor John Curtis.
Approve.
Councillor Phil Downing.
Approve.
Councillor Gareth Sullivan.
You're on mute, Gareth.
On mute.
I can lip read. He's approved.
Okay. Councillor Will Thomas.
Approve.
Councillor Peter Rees.
Approve.
And Chairman.
Approve.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we move on to item 4, report B, which is the breaches report on page 205.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, you're used to seeing this report at every committee meeting, members. Again, it identifies the breaches that were required to report to you by law. Again, as you can see, the majority of them are, well, all of them are the boilerplate breaches that we're talking about, operational breaches that will occur naturally. I mean, to eliminate these to zero, I think would be now impossible. But we report them to you as we're required to do. As you can see as well at the bottom of the report, we introduced GDPR breaches. Although, you know, under the pensions regulations, we're not required to report GDPR breaches to you. We thought it's prudent to include GDPR breaches to you for the first time at the previous meeting, and as you can see, we haven't any breaches in respect of GDPR this time. Contributions, again, those two employers are the very small employers. I think they're single figure employees in respect of both of them. So the impact in terms of you know, loss of investment returns, I mean, you know, it's negligible anyway because of interest rates and because of the actual contributions in question. You know, we're talking pence. Again, to members' questions, they have been written to. We have fined them. We have engaged them as much as possible. You know, that there is a degree of sympathy in that. As I say, there are small employers. You know, they have to do all their admin themselves. They presumably have day jobs, or because invariably these are in respect of community councils basically, and you know, the clerks tend to be part-time employees, so there is a degree of sympathy there, and because the consequences of the lateness of the contributions are negligible, I don't think it's worth, you know, losing too much sleep over at this point in time. Obviously, payment contributions from all the major employers is automated now, so we eradicate that issue. And with us medium-sized employers, and the admin team are currently working with them to automate the processes with them. Obviously, there have been modifications to the pensions admin system. Sorry, was that a question? No. There's been a modification to the pensions admin system, which allows smaller employers now to be accommodated onto an automated return. So that'll assist reducing breaches in that respect. Nothing further to add, Chairman.
Okay. Any questions for Jeff on the breaches report? No? Okay. Well, that report's for noting then. So we move on to item 4C then, which is the Competition Markets Authority setting objectives for investment as consultants. So, as I said, if Nick and David could retire for how are you going to bring them back in, Jeff?
And Karen's going to email them.
Yeah, Karen's going to email. There we are. Okay.
Right, we'll dial off now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, members recall a report came to committee last year as required, because under the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority legislation, if we engage investment consultants, we're required to set them objectives. And obviously, you know, we've had an investment consultant now for a number of years. At first working alongside our independent investment advisors, but latterly now we're working independently. And the CMA deemed it appropriate that we measure and appraise their performance, which is good practice. Obviously, when we had independent advisors, we did it on an informal basis. However, now by law, we're required to do it formally, and have it approved and monitored on a formal basis. And I think if you recall, on page 225, you can see on the left-hand side of that table, not in red, on the list of objectives that the committee approved at that point in time. Obviously now, how many months is it now? It's probably 8-9 months since you approved those objectives. We thought it appropriate that we come back and see how Hymans and the investment consultants are performing against those objectives that you set them. So on the right hand side of that table on page 225, you can see in red the work that they've done against the objectives that you set. Obviously, we're only part way through the year, and some of the objectives that you've set them, haven't been achieved as yet, because obviously it's still a work in progress because we're still only partially through the year. However, they've made great inroads into it. Obviously, some of the work is slightly historic and backward looking in terms of what they've done, but I think it's appropriate that they get recognition for having completed it and achieved it, and helping us move forward in our work program. For example, at 1.1, the Esg strategy that I mentioned earlier on, I know it was a number of years ago. However, it was a bit of groundbreaking work, a lot of work in training up the committee and the board members to Councillor Thomas's point earlier on about gaining your opinions, engaging you as stakeholders to help shape those views. That's what we did 2 or 3 years ago, and out of that work, the SG policy grew. So yes, it's slightly backward looking in that regard, but I think it's appropriate that they get credit for that now, because the fruits of that work is only coming to bear in the implementation of, say, for example, the BlackRock portfolio and the renewables fund that the committee have recently invested in. And as we go down the table, and so everything in red is what they've achieved during the year, or my and their assessment of what they've achieved during the year. So it's a very good, and I'm a hard marker here, mind. It's a good 7 out of 10 at 7.5, say, maybe 8 out of 10 at this stage. And I know Chairman mentioned it in his introduction. Obviously, we went through an open tender process to appoint Hymans way back when. Karen did a lot of work calling off the Norfolk framework for LGPS consultants. Open tender, valuation, appraisal, etc. And Hymans won its fair and square. However, as in all these things, it's very much dependent on the individual. Almost, it was almost like an interview process, because that basically that's what you're appointing. I know they have the might of Hymans behind them in terms of research capability, back office capability, legal capability, all the stuff that a corporate investment consultant can bring you. But at the end of the day, it's the investment consultant that you appoint, and as to how effective they are. And we were very lucky, I think, in the first instance, to have William as our lead partner. I think that he did a lot of work with and saw the chairman at lots of scheme advisory board meetings, and at national level, and at a local operational level. He was very good in helping shape, for example, the reallocation strategy that we recently implemented. Very supportive of my wish to put on the equity protection portfolio in the interim, and accommodated all those changes very well. And the advice he gave was pragmatic and concise and very much valued. And working alongside Nick then, and obviously Nick sort of took over on a caretaker basis as William was seconded elsewhere. However, just to give a bit of background to members, William has now been seconded permanently to the project that he's working on in Hyman's, and so they felt it appropriate to assign another lead partner to look after Swansea, and that's David Morton, who Chairman introduced us to at the beginning of the meeting. I only met David myself yesterday, formally over a Teams call. So, as I said to him yesterday, it's very much on probation as we speak now, and you know, we reserve the right to review it again. But you know, if he's half as good as William has been, you know, the last couple of years, I think we'll be looking fair. I'm happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Okay, any questions for Jeff? Peter?
Yeah, thank you. Are we able to set priorities on this list? And I'm looking at 4.1, and in bearing in mind the survey that we did, and one of the issues that came out of there was lack of communication and so on. And I noticed that, you know, could we set a priority
Breaking
for
up a
that?
bit, Pete.
Definitely, Councillor Rees. You know, the purpose of that survey was to inform areas that perhaps we weren't performing as well as we should. I know Claire and the team to try and do a lot on comms.
Sorry, Peter, we're not.
Sorry?
Shall I continue with my response, Chairman?
Yeah, we've lost you, Clive.
Oh, Peter, you know, they've done a lot of work on comms. However, obviously, through the survey, some stakeholders are still not happy with that progress. So you're quite right. We can reorder the business plan and address those deficiencies, let's call them, as the committee sees fit. If you know, we can prioritise that work. It is important communication with both members and employers. But the thing with surveys, though, I word of caution is that I find it with myself. You know, you're only very vocal and respond if you feel strongly about something, and then generally that tends to be when you have a negative view on something, i.e. you want to make a complaint. Yeah. So you know, people are not overly forward in heaping praise, say, where things are done well. So you know, that's the only word of caution I would have in terms of the not agrees in the response to that survey. But perhaps we can dig a bit deeper in terms of the responses, re-communication, Councillor Rees, and identify, you know, the issues that they've got. Is it the quality of the comms? Is it not regular enough? Is it, you know, we were rude? Oh, you know, if we can find out, you know, where we are actually deficient, and do a bit of digging on those respondees, perhaps we can identify an appropriate course of action.
I'm not you know, I'm not really tied up. I just wanted to raise the issue because it says that nothing has been provided.
Oh,
you know, and that was the issue, that, you know, communication is important, obviously, as you quite rightly say, but that was the issue. But you know, I'm not going to nail myself to a cross on it.
In fairness to Hyman's, they haven't been asked to provide anything in that regard. It's identified as something they can help us with. Obviously, following that survey now and following this conversation, we can say to them, look, we've had a look at the survey. It says, you know, we're rubbish at this. We're not very good at that. Look, Hyman's, what you can suggest and help us with to improve that in those areas. In fairness to them, we haven't asked them that question yet. That's why they have got nothing provided as yet in that box.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, so Jeff. Maybe we can pick that up as in the latter part of the year in terms of what opportunities. A survey is, as you say, is one medium you can use, but it can be quite blunt. But there must be other forms, other ways that we can communicate now, maybe through, maybe do a little video on the site, on the website, and, video updates from the chair or something. There's different ways of doing it now, isn't there, with technology? So maybe we can have a look at that and get some advice from them on how that might work.
No, definitely. Well, when you get them back in, perhaps it's something we can ask them, because obviously the next report, Chairman, on the agenda is feedback on the national knowledge assessment. We can you can raise it, read that, can't we?
Okay. Any other questions for Jeff on that one? No. Okay. So the recommendations are on page 221. It's recommended that the Pension Fund Committee approves investment consultants' progress against its identified and approved objectives as attached in Appendix 1. Jeremy, over to you.
Okay, Councillor John Curtis.
Approve.
Councillor Phil Downing.
Yeah, approve.
Councillor Gareth Sullivan.
Approve.
Councillor Will Thomas.
Approve.
Councillor Peter Rees.
Approve.
And Chairman.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. And then we move on to the one I've really been looking forward to, the Local Government Pension Scheme National Knowledge Assessment results. Do we have to...
Can I let them back in now?
Yes, please, Karen.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You're doing a drum roll, Clive.
I think we're all having detention. I think that's what Jeff is going to say.
He's going to have the dancer's hat, though.
That's definitely for me.
I disagree, Chairman. I
think we've done pretty well, haven't we? And
oh, definitely. I mean, 7th out of 18 funds.
Why is it such a? How is it only 18 funds then, Jeff? Is it just?
Well, if you think about it, Hyman's, the whole genesis of this project is Hyman's. Obviously, it was open to the whole LGPS. Yeah. They're trying to launch this as a national framework to assess knowledge of trustees and committee members. Yeah. So obviously those 18 funds, I would suggest the majority. However, Torvine were one of them, and they're not clients. So they did have non-client funds. So yeah, they're trying to build it. It's the first year they've ever run it. And I thought it was quite useful. And as I said to lots of the members, very, very high bar. I mean, the feedback that I gave to Hyman's, I don't know if they're back on board and they can provide some more commentary on it, but incredibly high bar. Some of the questions were very difficult. And
I think mine was I don't mind sharing what I had. Mine was about 63%, but I think it was like 8 areas, wasn't it, altogether, 8 categories, and it was really high in 5, but extremely low in 3. Yeah, I think the administration side and stuff like that is
actuarial side, I think.
Yeah, like actuarial side, as you say, are very very low. So but it was definitely worth doing. Give me a good appraisal of where I need to shape up.
No, I mean, in terms of the first national assessment, I mean, there's varying degrees of experience within the committee. I mean, I think our newest committee member is Councillor Curtis. I think she's been on board now for a couple of years. But, to have overall scored as well as you did in terms of that, I mean, Councillor Curtis has only been a member for 2 years. And I think the current makeup of the committee is probably one electoral cycle. So, to have scored as well as you did is I think is a credit. And I think the guys are back on now, Nick and David. I was just saying, Nick and David, I can't remember if you were on the call when I chatted with the people who set the national knowledge assessment, but it was a pretty high bar, wasn't it? I mean, gosh, those questions were tough. I mean, I got loads of them wrong, and I did find it I thought, flipping out, this is gonna be tough.
No, it was no, absolutely. We wanted to sort of set a high bar, and hopefully that, we'll see where there are a few gaps for some of the other committees. But generally, I think the results were very, good for Swansea, both for the board and the committee.
Good.
I don't know if Ian's online, but I suppose I think the chairman of the Pension Fund Committee is heartened by the fact that the Pension Fund Committee outscored the local pension board. It'd been embarrassing if it would have been the other way around.
It's not a competition, honestly.
Yeah.
Steady on now.
No, but I mean that's the logical outcome. You would hope that the decision makers are more informed than the people scrutinizing their decisions. Because if it was the other way around, and it is in some funds, the local pension board has outscored the pension fund committee. That's an embarrassing conversation that the chair of the pension fund committee's got to be having, isn't it?
Definitely. So I'm guessing now this will go towards contributing towards the overall training plan now for the next 12 months or so, Jeff.
Correct. The guys at Hyman's have identified a couple of areas you can see at the bottom of the report, and I'll discuss with Nick and David, appropriate ones, because there's training identified by perhaps the underperformance in the assessment, but then there's the training that members have identified. Oh, I'd like more training on that, and sometimes they're not the same. So maybe trying to chart a path between, where the scores indicate like you really need a bit more work on this, and they tend to be, the more prosaic, boring subjects in inverted commas, like admin, legislation, admin regulations, and actuarial regulations.
Yeah, I can't say it, but I know what you mean.
And in fairness to the committee, I mean, you only consider that maybe once every 3 years an evaluation comes around. You think, oh gosh, I better find out how evaluation works, and what's involved in that, and then you just park it till the next one comes around, and then you bring it out again. So, it is a bit unfair that you're supposed to have that knowledge at your fingertips constantly. But yeah, it was but hearteningly, investment management, section. I think you all aced that, which reflects the fact that's the majority of the agenda of the Pension Fund Committee's work, really.
Yeah, I think there's both this item and the last item, and even the breaches report, to extent with the GDPR stuff, is all evidence of good governance for me. That's what I see the committee being. We can evidence that we're doing the right training. We identify where there's gaps, and we're looking to cover it with additional training where that's identified. We're looking to communicate with members. All these things, a good evidence is, I think, if we get people like the pensions regulator come knocking on the door, or auditors, or anybody. So I think they've been really useful pieces of work, really.
Excellent. Chairman, if you don't mind, now Nick's back on the line. Perhaps we could ask Nick about that. Chairman asked, he was surprised at the low number of respondents to this, Nick, and I just surmised before you came back that it was probably largely Hyman's clients who responded, but it was open nationally, wasn't it, to non-Hyman's clients?
Yeah, it was open nationally. I think it was the first assessment of its type, and I think broadly the numbers that we got back into the number of funds who took part, we were sort of expecting around, I think it was the 20, or so, but we'd expect that to increase quite well. We would hope quite rapidly next year as people see the value in it, and as a useful sort of benchmarking exercise, and then it gives you a bit of a work plan for a few additional areas of training.
Are you taking this through the scheme advisory board, Nick? Do you know, is John, because I know John attends the scheme advisory board on dealing with good governance and things like that. I was just wondering whether there was something that you might want to run by them as a sort of a national opportunity.
Yeah, I believe we've done that, Councillor Lloyd, but I'll check with John specifically.
I can't recall it, but okay, good. All right then. So if there's no further questions, the recommendation is on page 221. And it's recommended that the Pension Fund Committee approves the investment consultant's progress against. Oh, no, that's the last one. Sorry.
It's the last one.
It is the last one. Bear with me. So we're on the recommendations on page 230. That the National Knowledge Assessment results are noted by the committee and the Deputy Section 151 officers delegated to identify suitable training informed by the assessment. Jeremy?
Okay, Councillor John Curtis.
Approve.
Councillor Phil Downing.
Approve.
Councillor Gareth Sullivan.
Approve.
Councillor Will Thomas.
Approve.
Councillor Peter Rees.
Approve.
And Chairman.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, at this point, we're on item 5, which is exclusion of the public. So, are we all in agreement that we exclude the public? Yeah.
Motion.
Okay. And Jeremy, can I ask you to the Democratic Service Officer to close the recording?
Yes, and the live feed will close as well. Thank you.
Yeah.